We're about to talk about one of my favorite subjects, one of my favorite things to do in the woods, and the most important thing to do in a survival situation. First off, why is this number one? Why is shelter number one? Freeze schmeeze. Hypothermia. Number one killer in the outdoors. Number one cause of death for people in the outdoors is hypothermia. Within 3 hours, 50 degrees and rainy, you can be essentially dead. You're not dead right when you get hypothermia, but you get it bad enough and you're out there, you're gone. Which means tomorrow you could have those weather conditions, especially out here. You can have weather conditions that will kill you. Throughout the year in this area, it's possible to have those conditions. Shelter is the number one consideration by far, because you can go 2 to 3 days without water, like we said the other day, 30 days without food. I'm going to put quotations around both of those. 3 hours. 3 hours in the wrong conditions can kill you. And there's two types of hypothermia. There's acute hypothermia, which would be like you fall into some water, into a freezing lake, and then you got hypothermia. And the one that's really dangerous is chronic hypothermia, meaning you're outside, you don't feel that cold, but your body is slowly losing heat. And you don't even notice it because you feel like you're all right, and then all of a sudden, you're gone too far, and you're going to die. You're going to die. So, number one form of shelter. What's the first form of shelter? Clothing. Our clothing. Clothing is the number one form of shelter. So you're out there and you don't have enough layers on and it's freezing cold. You stuff your clothes. Tuck your pants into your socks, tuck your shirt in, maybe tie something around your, the wrists of your long sleeve and stuff that thing with leaves. Stuff it completely full. And that can keep you very warm, especially if you're, if you're not, too physically active. A little bit physically active. You don't have to be very physically active with some leaves stuffed in your clothing to warm you up. I once went on a long wander on New Year's in a beautiful place, and my feet were freezing freaking cold, and I'd stopped and grabbed some leaves and stuffed them inside the shoes that I had, and my feet were burning hot. So it works really, really well. The idea with all of this is to create dead air space. You want to create dead air space. So the shelter that we recommend and that I love to build, that is the first thing you're going to build in a survival situation. Now, people like to have the idea in their head that they're going to build this little hobbit hole in the ground or maybe a cool teepee and stay in that. Or, any of the multiple advanced shelters, which are awesome and which we'll go over tonight. But if I'm in a true survival situation, even if there's 5 people to build a large shelter, I want to sleep in a debris hut because it is warmer than any other shelter you can build, period. It is the warmest of any of the shelters. 5 one-person debris huts. Debris hut. Debris hut. Debris hut. So, in 90% of the situations, 90% of the time, debris hut is going to keep you alive. What are the other conditions that it won't keep you alive? If it's really hot. If it's really hot, you don't want a debris hut because you're going to sweat your ass off and you're not going to sleep whatsoever. Multiple times, I've been in a debris hut and been too hot and just had to get out and, knock off a bunch of debris. And then, of course, the next night it gets colder and I get in there and then I freeze my ass off and have to put all the debris back on. And the other situations would be, when you have multiple people. I don't even know why it says 90% of the time in 90% of the conditions, because honestly, except for when it's super hot out, I can't really think of that it wouldn't work, unless you don't have debris around. But I mean, debris is whatever you have around. Now, obviously, if you're in the desert somewhere, you can make a brush arbor, but you want leafy debris, preferable. It's adaptable to multiple situations and multiple types of materials. You can use there's a cornucopia of different types of debris out there that you can use, quite obviously. You want to learn debris hut first before you learn any of the other ones, and pay attention to the principles, because from that point you can go ahead and build any of the other shelters without even really having any experience making them. Once you understand the principles, which are insulation, first and foremost, insulation, water drainage, water shedding ability, I should say. Water shedding ability. And comfort. Comfort is a consideration for your shelter. Who the hell wants to spend the night tossing and turning, uncomfortable as hell? That's just as dangerous as not having, well, I wouldn't say just as dangerous, but it's a very dangerous thing. You want to be somewhat well rested. I'll notice, though, when I'm out there in the woods, I don't need as much sleep. And I definitely don't need it at night all the time. Sometimes I'll take a nap during the day. Sometimes I like to be up early in the morning, well before the sunrise, especially if I feel like I want to eat and I want to actually have animals walk past where I'm at so that I can possibly harvest them. I want to be up in the morning. Maybe I want to be out hunting before it gets dark so I'm not back until after dark, But you definitely want it to be somewhat comfortable so that when you do go in there, you don't have to leave. So just like I was talking about the other day, just like in any sort of real estate, location, location, location. A good shelter in a bad location is a bad shelter. So you're out there, you're looking for your spot. The first thing you want to look for is any hazards. Make sure there's no hazards in the area that you're at. Make sure there's no hazards in the area that you're at, meaning overhanging dead limbs, a bear den, yellow jacket nests, which suck because they're so hard to tell where they're at until after you've stepped on them. But no no insects. There we go, hives, colonies. Thank you. God, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You want your, well, I got to listen to that other part of me, right? The part that's not my brain. You want it to be high and dry, just like your fire location. You want it to be high and dry. Invariably, at the advanced standard, somebody was just asking me if you have to work on all the skills that we teach here before you come back to the next class, and the answer is no, absolutely not. It's designed so that you can go from one class to the next, to the next, to the next, and like Tom told you already, the class really starts when you get home. So you don't have to work on stuff. But I would suggest that you work on debris hut, because in the advanced standard, everybody builds their own debris hut, and we take your sleeping bag around Wednesday. So if you've got a little experience, it helps. But invariably, there's people who walk by one or two or three of these beautiful little spots, and they're like, man, that's just gorgeous right there. Like, there's nice maple trees, and it's nice and flat right there, and there's like some moss off to the sides. That's gorgeous. Well, if you don't know your area, you might not know, or if you don't know the pine barrens, if you don't know the area at all, you might. I'll just tell you this: if you see some maples, and you don't see much growing underneath them, and you see a little bit of moss, it's going to get really wet should you get another rain, because those are all swamp areas. And every time people build these debris huts in these spots, they're like, yeah, I got the spot. And then if it rains, they're screwed, especially in the middle of the night. And let me tell you what, it is not enjoyable to have to get up in the middle of the night and your shelter is in inches of water. I've definitely spent the night in shelters and debris huts where I was completely soaking wet and had no idea. The reason why I wrote debris hut, obviously the debris is the most important part of all of this. I had a pile of leaves. I didn't even build a shelter. I just had a pile of leaves between a couple of rows of bushes. And I went to bed, and it was raining. It rained about 4 or 5 inches. Or I shouldn't say that. It was about 3 inches, 3 or 4 inches, which is a hell of a lot of rain. And it was raining before I got in there, and I realized the reason why you want to have the structure to it is because it was heavy as hell, and just getting in there that last night, it took me a half hour to get into the pile of leaves. And I woke up in the morning, and there was like a little spot on my shoulder that felt like it was wet. And it was the last night in it, and it had no structure, so I stood up out of it, and I was drenched to the bone. I had no idea. I slept the whole night. So if you're warm enough, you're going to be all right, but you still don't want to wake up in a pile of sopping wet, in a puddle of sopping wet leaves. Because I was fine, because it was the end of the class, and I had to leave anyway, go back to the Pine Barrens. But if that was a survival situation, I might have been fine, but I'd have been really hurting in about 25, 30 minutes, especially if I couldn't get a fire going. And I'll also tell you that despite the fact that this is the most comfortable to sleep in, it is the least comfortable goddamn thing to hang out in on a rainy day. So, just to throw that out. You also want it to be obviously free from excessive exposure to sun and wind. You don't want to get out of your shelter and you're right in a spot that gets howling wind. You want it to be out of the wind and out of excessive amounts of sun. But you do want it to get some sun rays so that it gets warm fast. Perhaps south and east facing. Definitely on the south side of a slope. Definitely on the south side of a slope. Keep in mind that at night, the side of a hill or partway up the hill is warmer than the bottom of the hill at night. In the daytime, it's the opposite. But at night, the middle or the top of the hill is going to be warmer than the bottom of the hill because of the moisture that moves up and down. What is that? They call that an inversion? I think that's what they call it. What's that? I don't know. I've never heard of it called that, but yeah, that's basically what it is, a little pocket of cool. I think it's like the moisture actually drops at night, and then at the bottom of the hill you have this higher moisture content. Yeah, but then you have the inversion, because our atmosphere is an inversion where it does the opposite of what it normally would do, and the cold air actually rises. That's why it's colder where the airplanes fly than down here. But anyway, doesn't matter. Uphill is warmer. Put it on the side of the hill. So, location would be your number one rule. Your next rule would be never to build a primitive shelter to be like modern architecture. Never build a primitive shelter to mimic modern architecture. Small is best. I'm going to write this big as well. Small. Yeah. Let me write small really large and underline it 3 times and put some exclamation points next to it. Small. Very important. Very important. Whoop, small. Small is best. You're thinking of a large sleeping bag. It's not a hut. It's a large sleeping bag made out of leaves. What's that? A debris sleeping bag? I just call it debris. Hold on. That's even better. Boop. Debris. You guys are going to go out and build a debris? All right, go do it. If you take a couple more tracker classes, you'll get the go do it joke. A small... build a debris small, a number one debris small. The hell is this in your notebook? Number 1, debris small. I don't know. Those guys are fucking nuts. Use your instincts. Use your instincts when materials are scarce. Use your instincts. Kids are far more likely to survive, or younger kids are far more likely to survive in some sort of true survival situation when it's cold than adults are, because they just instinctively know to burrow down underneath stuff. You know, for some reason, if adults get out there in a survival situation, they think of a roof instead of a blanket. Think of a blanket, not a roof. Right? Think of a blanket, not a roof. So building your debris hut. Collect some debris! Collect some debris. Oh, you know what? You also might want to put your shelter in a location where you have materials available. That's another huge consideration for the location. Make sure that there's some debris available. Sorry I missed that earlier. I'm screwing your notes over. Number 1, debris, small. Debris? Debris location? God, what a jerk. It's not a stick hut. It's a debris hut, so collect a ton of debris. You're out there and you're just shoveling debris, big, huge piles of debris. When I left my standard class, I had this good buddy. Actually, I should say when I moved back from California after taking my standard class, a couple months after my standard, I had a good buddy who was into going out into the woods, and every weekend we would go out and build a debris hut and stay in it. Sometimes most of the time I had to work on Saturdays, so we'd spend Saturday night and Sunday night, get up at like 5 in the morning, return our shelter to the earth, and then we'd go to work. Well, we'd go out in the first 3 debris huts. It was in February in Virginia, in the mountains, so it definitely got very cold. And I'd be shoveling, we'd find our location, I'd be shoveling debris, and I'd look over and my friend would be like, scraping up a little bit of debris, tossing out sticks. And I'm like, Paul, forget that, man. Debris, man, just grab it. We'll just deal with the sticks later on. And for the first 3, we got up in the middle of the night because we were freezing our asses off and got out and collected more debris and had to put more debris on the outside of them. So don't make that mistake. Don't worry about the sticks. Don't worry too much about the bugs that you're going to grab. Just grab as much debris as you can possibly imagine you would need, and then grab twice that amount. You can never have too much debris. So start by collecting a ton of debris. Because if you collect a pile of sticks first for the structure of it, and then something happens, you go ahead and try to spend a night sleeping underneath those sticks. If you collect a pile of debris and you can't finish it because you for whatever reason, you're going to have a much better chance of surviving if you nestle into the debris. So if you don't have debris, you can use, or just to give you an idea of different things you can use: leaves, pine needles, grasses, mosses, ferns, brush, just any kind of brush you get, Phragmites, cattails, preferably something that's got some dead airspace to it. I really love using reeds because it's good large material that has a hollow center. And that's perfect dead airspace. But keep in mind that the debris is going to cut the wind better than grasses or Phragmites or something like that. Debris is really going to stop the wind from blowing into your shelter. So you got your monstrous, huge pile of debris going. And then you collect a ridgepole. Okay, you're going to collect a ridgepole.
Can you just give us a rough idea, like say you were going to build one right now, what size pile would you collect?
All right, I'll just go to this right now. Since I started with debris, I'm going to just keep it on that tip. It says here 2.5 feet, but I'll say 3 feet. I'll say 3 to 3.5 feet is good to 30 degrees. Okay? So 3 feet thick of debris is good to 30 degrees. I'll get into that. I'll get into how you build it. I'm just telling you how much you want. Okay? 3 feet of debris on the whole thing, that doesn't mean you have a 3-foot pile of debris. That means that everywhere across the entire thing is 3 feet thick. 4 feet of debris, that's for 30 degrees. 3 feet, 30 degrees. 4 feet of debris is good to 0 degrees. It means you're all right. It means you're sleeping. It means you're sleeping. Comfortable is a state of mind. No matter how, I'll tell you what, the first one I slept in, it was a little bit itchy. After that, I could care less. I'll sleep in a pile of debris any day, any night, I should say. Your first time might be a little bit uncomfortable, but they're really not that uncomfortable. And when I say comfortable, warmth-wise, you're comfortable in there. You're warm. So 4 feet, 0 degrees. 5 feet, now it says here to minus 40, but I would say minus 20 for 5 feet. You get 6 to 7 feet of debris on there, you're good no matter what. You're good no matter what. So that's how much debris you're thinking of. So it's a lot of debris, but you'd be surprised how quick you can build one if you know what you're looking for. So you got your monstrous Mondo pile of debris, now you're building the structure. You're going to collect a ridgepole. You're going to collect a ridgepole, a sturdy pole that is as tall as you with your hand raised plus another foot or so. So as tall as you with your hand raised plus another foot or so. Okay, so you collect your ridgepole. Then you want to collect 2 Y sticks, 2 short sticks with a Y on them. You don't have to do that. This is to prop it up. You can see what's going on here. You collect 2 Y sticks so that you can use it with your ridgepole to make a tripod. Now, if you want to, you can lash this to a tree or a stump. Lay it on a stump. But the problem with that is that, first of all, you're going to have a doorway that you build, and you've got to go around the tree or the stump to get into the debris hut. And the second problem is that trees are designed to funnel water down the trunk. And so if it gets really rainy and your debris hut is tied to a tree trunk, there's generally one spot on every tree that's like the main channel for water. And it's quite likely that it's going to funnel water right into your debris hut. So I personally prefer the Y sticks every time. So I'll say get the Y sticks. But if you can't find them, you can use a tree. You can just lash the ridgepole to the side of the tree. So you're setting this thing up so that it is between knee and crotch high. Personally, I prefer it to be barely taller than my knee. I prefer it barely taller than my knee. But I'm a skinny guy, so if you're a little bit bigger, you might want it slightly taller so that you have a hair bit more space in there. I mean, like the tiniest smidgen of more space in there. Okay, so I'll draw out how you can do it with 2 people. If you can sleep comfortably, like me and my friend, we would build 2 persons, and I mean, it was my right side was warm every night. But if you're not comfortable sleeping right up next to, you're right next to him. You're right, you're right on top of him. It's a great honeymoon suite for couples. Except you can't move around in there at all, so it's not much of a honeymoon suite. It's a great, stinky, dirty hippie den. Minus the hippie part. I resist that moniker. So you get your 2 Y sticks, and you put this so that it's knee to crotch height. And then you're going to lay down underneath it so that your head is a good foot from the opening, from where the Y sticks are at least a foot. And then you're going to mark out around your whole body 1 hand's length and mark it on the ground. Okay, so you're going to just move mark out 1 hand length around your whole body and mark it on the ground like it is here. Then you're going to get some ribbing, which would be wrist-thick sticks. And you're going to prop them up on your ridgepole like ribs. And the bottom of them touches that outline that you drew. Yes. Yep, I will. Where should I back up to? You lay down underneath your ridgepole. Oh, and another thing that really helps, most of the time I prop the bottom of my ridgepole up because my feet invariably want to poke through the ribs if I don't. So most of the time I'll prop this up, the base of it. Okay, so prop up the base a little bit so my feet stick out and, lay underneath it, situate yourself. Then you mark around your whole body with your hand length from the base of your hand to your fingertips, around your whole body, and mark that on the ground. I normally just use a log. I find a log to prop it up with most of the time. A rock, whatever. Length, hand length, from the base of my hand to my fingertips. Not wide, long. Yes, sir.
Number one.
Yep.
What do you mean by transition zone?
Oh, I'm going to talk more about that later on. Transition zone would be the zone, the strip between, let's say, a field and a forest. There's what's called the transition zone, and I'm going to get into that really heavily later on today when I get into sign tracking. But it says that, but I don't normally like to put that up there for this lecture because it's a fluid thing. It's a really fluid thing, and we're coyote teachers. And Tom says that he doesn't do much coyote teaching at this class, and he feeds you. But there should be a big old brown light bulb that goes off saying bullshit. Because we're always coyote teaching, because that's the way we teach. But on this particular lecture, I want you to stay alive. So I don't want you to think inside a little box that says, oh, I have to look for this transition zone. Because sometimes you don't have a transition zone. Sometimes you don't have a ridgepole. Sometimes you don't have ribs. Sometimes you don't have debris. You got to think outside the box.
So what are you looking for in the transition zone? Protection from wind?
The idea of the transition zone is that you imagine a forest doesn't have as much underbrush, so it's a little bit windier in there. But then a field doesn't have much rain coverage, so the transition zone is thicker with leaves, right? So you're going to have some rain protection, but then you also get the sun rays coming in from the side, which you don't get in the forest. So that's why we suggest it. But to be honest with you, I don't normally do that. I personally prefer to be underneath the trees because it tends to be a little bit warmer there. If you ever go out, I for a year before and after my internship here, I refused to sleep inside. And at my brother's house, if I slept in the field most nights in the winter, I was covered with frost. And if I slept under the tree line, there was never any frost. So it tends to be a little bit warmer underneath the trees sometimes than out in a field. So I'd prefer to be inside that transition zone. But it's still a very good place to put your debris hut. So everybody understand the hands width away from them? Everybody got that in their notes? So next you get the ribs. Wrist-thick sticks. Okay, in graduating sizes from small to large. Okay, from small sticks to large sticks, because you're going to lay them up against the ridgepole like ribs. The bottoms of the ribs go onto that line that you marked off with your hand. Okay, so the bottom of those sticks go to that area that you marked off, and you want them to stop at the ridgepole. They can go a little bit above the ridgepole, but you do not want them sticking up and forming a big X or what have you, or just randomly sticking way above your ridgepole. Anybody have an idea why? Rain. Rain channels. You're making little rain channels. And also, when you throw the debris on, it starts to settle. And so you throw it on and it looks fine, but then it settles and you have this big gap where underneath that stick. So you want it to come just to the top of the ridge, and here's like a little blow up of that. Just far enough, about as far apart as they are thick. But it doesn't have to be exactly that. What's that? Yeah, wrist thick. Just something to bear a little bit of weight. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to collect some lattice. which would just be small sticks, just really tiny sticks that you can put over top of the whole thing to create a little matrix to keep the leaves from falling in. So you collect a lattice, small sticks to lay over the entire thing to keep the leaves from falling in. Okay? So you got your lattice on, the whole thing, front to back. And then, see, this is drawn incorrectly because my debris would be out to here, at least. Literally, I mean, if this was a scale size model, the debris would be out to where, on the whole thing would be out to there, if this were a scale model. Can everybody see that? I mean, yeah, if you're seeing this, there should be 5 times the amount of debris drawn on here. You don't want it to look like that. You want it to look like a massive debris pile. So you cover the whole thing in as much debris as you can collect. Okay? Now I'll give you another little hint. And if you got some pine needles or something that looks kind of pokey and stabby, and then you have some good oak leaves or something like that, keep those piles separate, because you are then going to stuff the inside of your debris hut after you put the debris on. I take my debris, after there's debris on the top of it, I take my nice soft cushy debris and I stuff it in there, and I crawl all the way in so that I can stuff it all the way at the back, and I stuff it moving all the way out. Then I get inside, I worm my way in right in the middle of that debris that's on the inside. So there's debris underneath me and on top of me, okay? I get inside there, and I roll around, and I crush that debris all around. And then I get out, and I stuff it again. And I get in again, and I roll around. And then if it needs more, then I put a little bit more in. What does it mean to need more? If you get in there, and it's hard to move around, you're good. If it's hard to move around, yeah.
Are you saying that you stuff the debris up before you pile the debris on?
No, I put the debris on before I stuff it. I put the debris on the outside, and then I stuff the inside, just like it's drawn here. Debris, then stuff the inside. So I stuff it, I get in, I roll around, I get out, I stuff it again, I get in again, I roll around. And again, if it's like hard packed, if it's literally like the debris is hard, you might have a touch too much. You don't want it to be hard, but you want it to be where you can't really move around super easy. You need it really full of debris. If you build a debris hut and you don't stuff the inside, you're going to have a cold, miserable night. I've built them before where me and my friends built one and we didn't have enough debris, and we built it and we looked at it and we were like, this is going to be cold. And it was for 3 people and it was poorly built, and so we just took all the debris off the outside and put it on the inside, and the hut just served to keep it from flying all over the place. It's more important to have, no, I shouldn't say more important. It's very important to have the inside stuffed. Okay, so you've got your debris on the outside now. You've got the inside stuff with debris. Now you're going to build a doorway. You're going to build a doorway.
Do you have to be picky about the lattice?
You don't. You do not have to be picky about the lattice. It's okay. It's okay if some of the leaves fall through.
If we lay the lattice,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're just laying it on there. Yeah, it doesn't have to be laid in a certain way. It doesn't have to be woven through. It doesn't have to be, it's not crucial how you lay the lattice on. Yes, sir. Yep. I prefer it to, if I'm like, if it's rainy out or especially if I have low debris, I'll take like pine boughs, green pine boughs, and use that. I prefer to have branches that have leaves on them already because it's just extra debris for my debris hut. So you lay your lattice on, you put your debris on top of your lattice, you stuff the inside. Now you're building a doorway. So to build the doorway, I start with 2 little Y sticks, and I'm talking about the doorway to most of my debris huts is like that big in a square, to where I have to move my shoulders to get in and out of it. Because if you don't build a doorway, which I didn't build them the first 3 or 4 times, your head and your shoulders are going to be exceedingly cold, unless you make your debris hut extra long. But don't worry about that. Just build a door. Build a door frame. You're going to get 2 small Y sticks. Stick them into the ground. Stick them into the ground. Just barely shoulder width apart. Maybe even a little bit smaller, like if you crunch your arms together to get in there. And then spread them out, when you get inside. Then I'll take 2 sticks and I'll shove them into the debris on the one end and lay them on top of the Y sticks on the other end. Does that make sense? I have my door frame. Okay? I have my triangle. Now I'm going to lay, now I got my 2 little Y sticks as well. And this is from the front view. Okay? Now I have 2 sticks that I cram into the debris on one side and have them laying on the sticks on the other side. Does that make sense now? Hopefully. Get my Y sticks? Yeah. It's going in just like this. It's going out, if that makes sense. It's not going to be, like this is drawn like this where it's all perfectly straight. It's not going to be perfectly straight, but hopefully you guys get the idea. You could lash them, you could tie them on, but then you have to make cordage. Save a little bit of energy. Yep. What's that? Mm-hmm. No, not normally, because I have enough debris on the outside that it's held pretty solidly. And even if you do beat it up, it's just gonna bounce. It's like the same as the teepee structure. At first, it's really rickety, but once you put everything together, it holds together pretty solid. And it doesn't really matter if the ribs fall down a little bit. As long as the debris, you have enough debris, you're going to stay warm. Yeah. It's just stuffed in the debris to hold them. It's not like important where you stuff them. You just need them to be held up at that end. Then you're going to build you're going to use and do like you did with the ribs and just build a little frame around that whole little igloo entrance. Okay? And then you're going to cover that whole door frame with debris. Does that make sense? So you built this little igloo doorway entrance, and you've covered that all with debris. Because imagine that I build a debris hut. Okay? Imagine I build a debris hut, and I'm sleeping in here. And I have 3 feet of debris around the whole thing. But then up front, I don't have a doorway. That means I have 0 feet of debris at my head, which is where I'm losing most of the heat. So if you need 6 feet of debris on your debris hut, you need a 6-foot-long entranceway. And you need to cover that with 6 feet of debris, because otherwise you don't have 6 feet of debris around your debris hut. Does that make sense? You have an open doorway, you have no debris in that front part, unless you make it super long and stuff it really full of debris. Does that make sense? Then, when you crawl into your debris hut, you want to have a pile of leaves. Now, I find that pine needles work better for this, but it doesn't matter. I'll come in and I'll crawl in maybe on my belly and I'll just grab the debris and kind of drag it in behind me and plug the doorway as I enter. If you are having trouble with that, you can take off one of your layers because you're going to go out there with layers on, not with one big jacket, and you can tie off the ends and stuff your shirt with debris and plug the door with that. And keep in mind that when you get into your debris hut, let's say you only have 2 layers of clothes on. If you can take if you're used to the leaves and it's not bothering you, I'll take off my outer layer of shirt and use that because you're warmer without clothes on inside an insulated space than you are with clothes on, because your arm has, your body heat generates all over, so your arm is going to keep your side warm. Your legs keep each other warm. That's like that's the hypothermia trick. Is when if somebody's in hypothermia, you strip them down naked and you stuff their clothes inside their debris, inside their. I knew it too. I heard that discussion you had with that guy. You were talking with one of the volunteers. No. Oh, really? Oh, well, I was before. You were talking to him earlier. I'm sorry. If I knew that you were talking with her, I never would have said that. I'll let the ladies win. He's the one. He's the one back there I was trying to get. Not her. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I'd have let you win. Now, this guy over here, I didn't mind if he lost the argument. Yup. Yep. Yeah, you're warmer inside there if you have less clothes on, because then insulation works both ways. And if your arms are up against your body, like when I'm snorkeling and I'm cold, I drop my arms beside my body instead of swimming like that. So your body will help keep itself warm if there's nothing insulating in between your body parts, if that makes sense. So, how do you make a two-person debris hut? My preferred method, up in the front, there's generally enough space. You can make this entranceway so that there's enough space for shoulders. The problem is where it pinches down to your feet. So what I'll do, and this is an overhead view. I'm going to just move this. Erase this a little bit. So I'll have my Y sticks. All right, this is an bastardized overhead view, okay? This is my Y sticks from above. Bloop. And I get 2 ridge poles. And they go off like that. Then I put on my ribs. And I just lay some ribs over the top of it. Now you have this flat space that you want to make sure you slope with your debris. Another thing that you can do for low debris situation is I'll take some more of that lattice and I'll put a huge pile of lattice right on this middle space, a mound of lattice that has like a slope to it, and then put my debris on. And that way I don't have a flat spot that's going to allow water to drip in. If you do 3 feet of debris, 3 solid feet of debris that slopes down, you can pour a 5-gallon bucket on it and you're not going to get wet inside. But that's after it's already settled. And keep that in mind when you put your, yeah.
I was just thinking it would be good to put like mud or like clay or something.
No, because it's compressing it. If you have enough settled debris, you don't have to worry about the rain. Yeah.
Now when you're doing debris, you want to start at the bottom.
What do you mean when you're pouring it on? Yeah. Just pile it on. Don't worry. I mean, you can. Don't worry about it. Pile it on. Go on a wander. When you come back, it's going to be pretty well settled. Pile some more on. It doesn't matter how you put it on, as long as you get even coverage. I just throw it on there and then look at it and kind of put it in places where it needs more. But I always go for overkill. Yeah.
I'm unclear about the sticks going in to make your doorway.
The sticks going into to make your doorway. You're just to hold the sticks up.
But you said like something about if you don't have 4 feet or 3 feet of doorway, then you don't have 3 feet.
Yeah.
So we make it 3 feet long, the doorway?
Yeah. Roughly. Yeah, but remember you're 1 foot into the debris hut already, so there's your 1 foot. So you could do 2 feet.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Does that make sense? You want your head to be at least as far away from your entrance as your debris hut is thick. Does that make sense? You want your head and shoulders to be as far away from your entrance as your debris hut is thick. So if my debris hut is 3 feet thick, I want my head to be 3 feet away from the entrance. Right? Does that make sense? No, you plug it when you get in. Remember I was saying you crawl in and I plug that hole with some debris. Yeah. Yeah. Or you can make... Well, cold feet sucks too. So, does everybody understand this 2-person debris hut? Another way you can do it is just have your Y poles and then just have ridge poles coming off both ends of it. And they're extra long, and you just have your entranceway to the side. You have maybe you put a 3rd Y stick and you enter through the side. And then one person goes in this way and the other person goes in that way. It's another way to do it. You can do this with 3, 4, or 5 debris huts. Just build them in a star pattern. Then you're sharing debris. Yeah. This one? Y sticks are the green ones, right? So those green, this is an overhead view. Okay? These Y sticks, those are Y sticks. And then you have 2 ridge poles. And they go off like this. And then you put ribs on, like so. And then you put ribs on in between the 2 ridge poles. And that's to give your legs enough room with 2 people in there. Does that make sense? What's that? Yeah, it does, but it's easier to make that upper body wide with, you can just make your Y sticks wider out. Whereas if you only have one ridge pole, there's only so much you can do. Does that make sense? Like because it's so short down there that you can't make it super wide because your feet will pop out the bottom of it. Yes.
Have you ever put sticks on the outside of the debris too to hold it down?
Yep. I was just about to get to that. If it's really windy, cover the outside of your debris hut with lattice, small sticks. You don't want heavy sticks to press it down. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sometimes in Oregon, it really gets rainy and the debris is wet. You know, like the leaves are wet.
If it's wet and thick enough, you'll dry them out. If it's wet, when my friend and I would go out and build debris huts that were not well built at first and had to get up in the middle of the night to put them on, we didn't touch those leaves because they were wet. They actually ended up freezing in the night, and then we'd put them inside our debris hut, but we didn't even notice that they were wet. We were warm enough, even though they were wet. So it can be a little bit wet. Just remember that the leaves are more compressed when they're wet. So you don't want to like throw them on in big wet cakes. You want to kind of fluff them up when you throw them on there. Yes?
I was going to ask about stuff in your shirt at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
Leaves were wet, better.
I would probably not stuff them. I would probably not stuff my clothes if the debris was wet. You know, just to keep the wetness off of my body. If I was freezing though, if I was like freezing to death, then I would. But I just rather stay dry if I'm comfortable enough. Rather stay dry. So you can do lots of things to make these a little bit more livable in a survival situation. You can build a little workroom out front, build a little wiki up, which we'll talk about tonight at the advanced shelter talk. Yeah. I mean, I'll cover the whole thing with lattice sometimes to make sure the leaves don't blow away. Another thing you can do is make a hot rock bed. So you have your spot where your debris hut's going to be, and you dig a hole, and you get some rocks nice and hot in the fire. And you use some logs or sticks to whatever to pick those rocks up, lay them in that hole, cover all the rocks with dirt, and let it sit for about 2 hours, and then put your debris hut over top of it. If you don't let it sit for 2 or 3 hours, the moisture in the ground is steaming up. And if you build your debris hut right away, it's going to get really steamy and wet in there. But the rocks will stay hot for hours, longer than 8 hours. So you get in there and it's just warm on the ground. Yeah. At least 6 inches. At least 6 inches of earth on top of those rocks because they'll burn the hell out of you if they're too close to you. You can also, yeah? Yeah, definitely make sure you gather your rocks away from the water source so they don't explode in your fire. You can also do a happy rock. You get a little rock, and you just get it just warm enough so that it's hard to touch, and then I'll stuff that at the bottom of my debris hut sometimes. Get in there, and you have a nice little heat source that's radiating heat for the whole night. But that's just to give you a quick idea of just some of the different things you can do to make it more comfortable. I don't like too many. I don't like to have too many hot rocks in there because you're comfortable going in, but you also have to be prepared to sleep like pretty still. You know, I didn't sleep very still before I started sleeping in debris huts, but now I sleep in a little. You're like this all night. You know, literally just like this. Now, if you get really slick, the one that we built that the wiki up burned down in front of it, we built a 2-person. My girlfriend and I built a 2-person, and then when I left, she took and she lined the whole thing with grasses, and she got it so thick with grasses that she had enough room that she could toss over and move around and like sleep a little more comfortably. But it was way oversized for her, and it had just tons of debris on the outside, and that's the only reason why it kept her warm enough despite that extra size is because she just had a ton of debris on top of it. In fact, that's one of the ones where I had to get up in the middle of the night and just get out. It was too hot. It was way too hot in there. So I'm going to do a quick slideshow to give you guys the idea of how this looks, and then we're going to go out and build one. So you can take a couple minutes while I'm getting this all situated. Go to the bathroom, do your thing. I promise that it won't be as long as last night's slideshow, nor as dark, so that sleeping might not be an issue.